What's up, guys? My name is Mike, this is All Things Fish, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different outside the fish room, but it's going to help us out later. And if you're not into fish, this would be a good build for you guys too. Now downstairs, I use these 27-gallon black totes to store a lot of my supplies. But while they do stack fairly well, it can be kind of cumbersome moving them around. So what we're going to do is build a storage rack using some simple 2x4s and hand tools to get this done. Now, first you need to measure your space and the items that you'll ideally be placing in this rack to determine exactly what kind of design you want to come up with. Here's the design I came up with, and some measurements as to how large I wanted to make it. Plus, it allows you to figure out exactly how much lumber and material that you'll need to accomplish this. Now, before you get started, once you have your game plan, you need to make sure you have the proper tools on hand. Now, the tools that I'll be using today can be found at any hardware store and may or may not be the best tools for the job depending on what you're trying to do. First, a simple tape measure so that you can measure the boards before you cut them. Remember, measure twice, cut once. Safety glasses, keep your eyes safe. A simple square and a pencil. We'll use this to mark our wood, make sure we get good straight cuts. In order to make those cuts, we'll need a saw. Now this is a circular saw. You can use a hand saw just fine. And if you plan on using a circular saw, if it's not cordless, you'll need an extension cord. You'll also need a drill. Now here I have a 1/4 inch impact for actually driving the screws in. And I like to pre-drill my hole using a 1/8 inch drill bit and a regular drill. As far as hardware goes, today we'll be using 2.5 inch number 6 Phillips head construction screws, which you can find at your Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, in a big box for not a whole lot of money. And then I determined that I had to need 10 2x4 by 8 2x4s. So I went to the local hardware store, picked these up for about $4 a piece. Well, this specific rack will be designed and built to hold these totes. You can use this same design with a couple slight modifications if you want to build an entire rack to hold an abundance of tanks. This is exactly how I built my racks downstairs in the fish room, and here's a link to a video with more on that. Alright, so you've got all of your supplies gathered up, you have the tools you need on hand, you have a game plan to go off of, you drew up a little blueprint, you know exactly what you want to do. Now, for my build, I'm fortunate to have enough space that I can make this thing 8 feet tall. So, using our 8-foot 2x4s as 4 corner posts, I don't have to cut any of those guys. So let's get down and measure some wood to get cutting. For this specific build, based on the space that I have and the requirements it needs to meet, I've decided that using 2-foot sections front to back and 4-foot sections across will give me a sufficient shelf area to store these racks. Now, using a 2-foot and a 4-foot section also helps cut down on waste, because you don't have any board left over. It's an 8-foot board, you take a 4-foot section, 2-foot section, voila, move on to the next one. So, take your tape measure, measure out to 2 feet at a time, make your initial mark, and then with our square, we'll line the angled edge of the square on one side of your board, and just use that to make your straight line all the way across. You've measured and marked your lumber, you're ready to cut your short sides and long sides to actually start building each shelf. We're getting ready to go. But before we make any noise, let's don our protective equipment. And if you're not comfortable with power tools, or you simply don't have access to something like a circular saw, a hand saw like this guy will work just fine. Or if you'd rather, many hardware stores such as Menards will measure and cut the boards for you, saving you some time, hassle, and potentially your fingers. Now today I'm going to use this circular saw right here. So before we can get moving, we'll plug in our extension cord to get some juice, and then you'll simply line up the indicator itself on the saw with your line that you've drawn. Hold your longer side steady. Once you're lined up, all you have to do is follow the line and let it fall away. We've got our short sides cut. Now let's move on to the longer 4-footers. Buddy. Got all our pieces cut to fit, so we're done with the loud stuff for now. Now we can move on to taking these short pieces and long pieces and building the actual boxes that will form the shelves on our rack. I found it easiest to go ahead and build each shelf individually, and then we'll attach them to the 4 corner posts later. So grab your 2.5-inch number 6 Phillips head screws, your drill with a 1/8 inch bit, and your Phillips head driver. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take our short side, place it on the end of the long side here, and then we'll drill our holes through here, run our screws through, and we'll build the box real quick. Now for the fun part, to get all this squared away, no pun intended, we're going to square up our corners the best we can. And for my use, this is just for storage, so I'm not super worried about it. As to how square and how smooth you can get these to butt up against each other, it'll kind of depend on your board selection. These are just cheap framing studs, not bad. And we'll take our 1/8 inch drill bit, and what we're doing is we're pre-drilling the holes. This will help alleviate and prevent cracking from when you drive the actual screw through there. Take your driver, snug her up. Still looks pretty flush. Buzz one more hole through. One more screw in this side. And there you go, on to the next corner. The last corner, just line things up about as best we can get them there. Pretty close. Pre-drill our hole. And then if you remember earlier in the video when I mentioned that I'd like to use a drill and a separate driver, definitely not necessary, but it certainly helps speed up the process, not change it between a driver bit and an actual drill bit when you're pre-drilling those holes. There we have the first one done. A roughly 2 foot by 4 foot rectangular box that'll act as our shelf. Just a test fit. Boom. I think she'll work. Now, I'm not going to skin these shelves on top because all that'll be on them is these totes, which as you can see are firmly supported in the front and the back. However, if you want to place smaller objects on each shelf, such as a small aquarium or just smaller totes, you could definitely take, I would recommend a 3/8 or 1/2 inch sheet of plywood. Just skin the top of that, maybe 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 screws, tack it down around the edges, and she should hold nicely. All right, now we have our frames together. Let's mock things up a little bit. Obviously, we can refer to our blueprint up there, and the measurements are pretty well in place. But before we really start putting things together, let's just double check and make sure that everything worked out. Now, my bins themselves, with the lid, are roughly about 14.5 inches. So I figure if I give myself 16 inches from the bottom of the shelf above it, that should allow me plenty of room to slide things in and out while maximizing the space vertically, allowing me to fit the most shelves possible. It's time to start putting this thing together. Now, ideally, I'd just take this inside, put it together, and voila, I don't have to move the pig. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to mock things up out here, show you how I'd put it together, then we'll strip it down, take it downstairs, load it up, and show you the final product. This part can get a bit tricky, and if you have a couple extra set of hands, it would definitely be helpful. However, I'm on my own, so a little ingenuity and some quick clamps, and we'll get her done. So we determined that we want the bottom of the shelf above to be 16 inches from the bottom of the rack, which gives us a couple inches of clearance in order to slide our tubs in and out. So we'll go ahead and mark 16 inches so that we have a line to mount our next shelf on. We've got our 16-inch marks drawn out on all four corner posts so we know exactly how high to mount our first shelf to. Let's get crafty with some clamps and whatever else we deem necessary. You can see here we've got our mounting line on the inside, so what we're going to do is move this up into place, clamp her in, and tighten her up. Now obviously the first one will be the toughest if you're by yourself, but with a little ingenuity, now that one's in, and we've come up with a system, we can line this up with a bottom line, attach it, and move on to the other side. Now that we've got this going on here with our corner posts attached to our first bracket, if I was going to put serious weight on this, I would run a lag bolt through here instead of just the two Phillips screws. But since it's just to hold some extra equipment and supplies, screws on all four corners will work just fine. Awesome. Now with the first shelf in place, plenty of room to slide underneath. She'll sit sturdy up top. Problem there. Now, like I mentioned before, if this stand was going to hold some aquariums or some serious weight in addition to the screws down here at each corner joint, I would also take something like this. That's a 3/8 inch grade 5 bolt or better. I'd put a washer on either side and a nut, and I'd run a hole through there roughly in the center, and I'd place that bolt through there. So the bolt, the washer, on the other side of the 2x4, a washer, another bolt, cinch them together, and that'll bear the weight, and then these screws will stabilize it front to back. Now, let's move on to the next one. Preparing to mount the next level of this, we need to take our same 16 inches once again. Let's take our 16 inches from the top of here. Remember, that gives us our clearance in between. 16 inches there. Mark it. Take your square. Nice straight line. Boom. Now let's go all the way around. Oh, it's that easy. So we got one row, two, three, and then I've got room. I'm gonna break this down now that it's mocked up. I'm gonna take it downstairs, add the last couple rows, and we'll take a look at it once it's all put together. Now, I plan on leaving this thing bare because honestly, it's just storage down in the basement, so I don't really care how it looks. However, if you wanted to paint it, you could roll it real quick with your favorite color, or if while you're outside, hit it with a quick coat of rattle can and call it a day before you take it inside and put it all together. But let's head inside. I'm going to put this thing together and show you how it looks. All right, guys, so here we are down in the basement. She's all put together. As you can see, fits snug as a bug in a rug. And like I said, it's the basement. It's unfinished. I'm not worried about it looking super neat. As you can see, I can fit a row on the bottom, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll probably put a sheet of plywood across the top and use that for some loose storage. So at the end of the day, a couple hours of work and maybe $50 in supplies, and we've got a rack that we can hold all kinds of different stuff on. Plenty sturdy. She's not going anywhere. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, email me, mike.allthingsfish@gmail.com. I hope this helps you out with your next project, whether it's a storage solution like this, or you're building a fish rack, or maybe it's for something completely different. Let me know what you plan on using this idea for, and until next time, we'll catch you later.